My name is Alan Cameron. Today is April 5th, 2017, and the time is 4:01. We are at St. John's Northwestern Military Academy. I'm interviewing first responder and veteran Fire Chief Charlie Myers, who was born on June 2nd, 1957 in Chester, Connecticut, and served in the Pacific and United States from 1977 to 1997. Charlie Myers was a senior master sergeant in the United States Air Force and served as a fire protection specialist. This interview is sponsored by the Bell Tower Memorial. Chief Myers, what were you doing for a job before you entered into the world of Air Force and firefighting?
My job before I entered in, my father owned a car dealership, affectionately known to us as the Garage. It was Myers Middlesex Garage. So I was working for him prior to going into the Air Force. I had actually done 3 semesters in college working on an industrial engineering degree. But then chose to go in a different direction and take over my father's business and enter the United States Air Force and take on a new challenge.
So when you entered the firefighting and rescue world, it wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was something you slowly came to develop as an idea.
Actually, it was. I'd actually been a volunteer firefighter in the town of Chester, where I grew up. And I'd actually started as a junior firefighter. So that meant that I could start training at age 16. So I'd started there, and then you had to get elected into the fire department. So at age 18, I was elected into the fire department and volunteered with them. So I had some knowledge about about doing firefighting, and was very interested in it, but I'd never thought about it as a career perspective until a friend of mine joined the Air Force with a guaranteed job to be a firefighter.
Okay. So could you please tell me about your early weeks of training and how you adapted to military life? Was it an easy or difficult adaptation?
I'd say it was difficult because that first part of it is basic training. And when you enter into basic training, you know, they're gonna take you from the individual you are to being one of the team. And you have to learn that pretty rapidly, that you're no longer an individual as much as you need to become a team with 50 other people in a very short period of time. So basic training was a difficult event. They yelled a lot. They had very high standards. They had very high expectations. Leaving basic training and then getting into what we called tech school, where I actually got trained to be a firefighter, that was a much easier experience because that was something that I had some familiarity with and I enjoyed, and just had a real interesting time with that.
Okay. So what are some lessons you've taken away from your experience in the Air Force for nearly 20 years and now 10 years in civilian firefighting and rescue?
Lessons that I took away from it. You know, I think one of the biggest lessons I probably took away from the Air Force was the idea of leadership and what it took to be a leader and what it meant to be it. But the other thing was about the ideas of integrity, commitment, selflessness. Those types of things were huge and ingrained as part of what we did as a member of the military. And that whole idea of service before self and what it took to do the job.
Okay. So I see you've got a pile of photos and other such documents. Is there anything here you really are rearing to go and show Anything you're particularly proud of or you find particularly interesting?
So I guess I'll start with the helmets. I thought about it as the tale of two helmets. So this was the helmet that we wore when I was in the Air Force. It was that silver shroud was for the aircraft firefighting and to reflect the heat from the flames. And then when I transitioned to the civilian world, it was to the civilian helmet that I wear today. So from that perspective, it's kind of that difference. What I did is I brought with me kind of two different things. One is that I can bring to you would be, this was my picture and what it was like when I was in basic training. So the very beginning of the career. And then the very ending of the career was when I received my retirement, which was signed by the President of the United States 20 years later. So I think that was pretty important kinds of things. The other thing was that I have is the stripes that I never got a chance to put on. So I was selected for Chief Master Sergeant, got my line number at that 20-year point, and because of what assignments were available, my wife and I made a conscious decision to leave that behind, retire as a Senior Master Sergeant, and go out and try a new career, which has kind of led me to where I am today.
And speaking of past time in the Air Force, do you have any leadership figures, any inspiring figures, any stories of someone who inspired you to keep going through training and schooling to reach and advance in the way you did? I've been very fortunate. I've had a number of phenomenal mentors throughout my entire career. The only way I would have gotten to the point of achieving the rank of Senior Master Sergeant was by my mentors. And I had mentors at every different assignment. So, you know, that first mentor was a Vietnam veteran. His name was Bob McAllister. He was a Senior Master Sergeant. He was the Deputy Chief, became the Fire Chief actually while I was at Kadena. Just a phenomenal man that had an unbelievable amount of experience. He was a firefighter. He went to Vietnam. While he was there, they didn't have enough pararescue or PJs. So the firefighters that flew on a helicopter back then, they became pararescue. So he was then assigned to pick up downed pilots. Just a phenomenal person and for what he did. Went to the second assignment was Loring Air Force Base. Had several mentors. One of them I still stay in contact today. He became the fire chief, but then he was an assistant chief. Mac McPherson, just a phenomenal guy that did it. But my station captain, Norm Berger, retired Air Force guy, for 3 months I couldn't figure out what he said because he'd mumble. But when I finally figured out how to understand him, he just became a real mentor to me and helped out. And it was like that at every different assignment. All 7 of them had people there that helped me and really inspired me to do the job that I did. And that's what I want to be for others. I want to be what they were to me, to others, as I continue to do this job. You mentioned that you've been on 7 different deployments or assignments. Is there one that speaks to you as the biggest or most contributing to your enjoyment of your time in the Air Force?
You know, that's a real interesting question because I'd tell you that there probably are a lot of people that would say this was the best assignment I ever had, one of them. I'd tell you all 7 of them were phenomenal assignments. There was something I enjoyed out of every one of them. The one that probably stands out the biggest to me was Alaska. And the reason that probably stands out as the biggest is that's where my daughter was born. My wife and I, we only have one child. She was born in Alaska. It was a phenomenal assignment. We drove to Alaska, took the ferry up out of Seattle, drove in at Haines, and then while we were in Alaska, we bought a motorhome and we drove out of Alaska. So we got to drive the Alcan all the way down. And it had a lot of interesting things in it. It was a great assignment for many reasons, but I think the biggest reason was because my daughter was born there. But I can tell you that every single one of them was a phenomenal event. Learned so much. We enjoyed every one of them, and there's never any regrets to any of it.
And you speak of the whole time you were in the Air Force being phenomenal. Would you like to elaborate on Desert Storm, Desert One, or any of your other?
Sure. So a couple of them. One was when I was at Loring's second assignment. I got chosen for a classified assignment. At that time, had no idea what we were going to do, where we were going to go. They gave us a long list of things we had to bring, and it was just strange that you needed 15 pairs of underwear and different kinds of things that you had to bring with you. So packed up, had 3 military B bags. One of them was all of the equipment we needed for austere living conditions. The other one had your clothes and personal effects, and the other one had firefighting gear. So made my way from northern Maine by plane into Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, it was just kind of like somebody knew who we were and where we were going to be. Got picked up in Philadelphia, got taken to McGuire Air Force Base, put on a 141. We flew from there into Germany. The orders had originally said we were going to Italy. We never made it to Italy. Went up to Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, and then flew out of there to Watakeen, Egypt. So that was a former Russian military base. And what it turned out we were there for was we were there after the Iranian hostage crisis, and we were there for the second rescue attempt if it was ever going to be pulled off. Austere conditions, working with the maintainers that were there and other civil engineering people, because fire protection was in civil engineering, and trying to make sure that we were prepared if they wanted to do that second rescue attempt. The other one that you mentioned is I was fortunate enough to be selected to go to Military Airlift Command that later became Air Mobility Command. And while I was there, the first thing that happened was Desert Storm. So my job during Desert Storm as a military fire protection program manager is what we were called, was to select units to be deployed into the war zone. But every day I'd walk in and I'd ask my boss if I could go. And he was a Vietnam vet as well, and he was, no, you don't want to go to war. You're going to stay here and keep doing what you're doing. And so in many cases, those people that I selected to go take these assignments were people that I knew. We were a pretty small family. A lot of times we knew each other and heard each other. So that was what happened. The other piece that happened out of that is after Desert Storm, the next thing that came up was Operation Restore Hope, and that was in Somalia. We were going to do relief aid. And then relief aid turned into just a disaster. Yep, and turned into Black Hawk Down as well, and that whole event. So we were hand selecting firefighters to support the air bridge and to go into Mogadishu and support the international movement that occurred during that entire time.
So you mentioned sending men and women into fire zones to help protect those who fly their planes and whatnot from fire and to try to keep those people safe. What is it like to know that your precautions and your steps you take to maintain safety help save lives and protect lives?
It's very gratifying to do the job. You know, the best part of the job is when you're at the street level and you're in the truck and you're doing the job. But the other part of the job was to send people to do that. And it was a phenomenal thing. When I was, you know, not only did we do Desert Storm and we did Operation Restore Hope, but the other thing that a lot of people don't know is, and it goes on today, is every time there's an aircraft movement, wherever those aircraft are going to go, somebody is doing an analysis about where they're going to land. We had surveys of every Air Force or every airfield in the entire world, with the exception at that time of what was in the Soviet Union. So if we were going into thumb rate Egypt or Oman, for instance, and I got a call at 2 o'clock in the morning, said we had a mission that was going to go in there. They would tell me how many aircraft were going to land and take off, and that was called the MOG. And based on that, we had a certain requirement of fire protection that we needed to have. So we'd make that determination, and then I'd normally pick up the phone and on voice only, mobilize enough equipment and enough manpower to go, and had enough trust with all of these fire chiefs that I was dealing with to say, you get them ready to go, and we'll send you by encrypted, secure things, the actual orders to ship. But they would start the process to give them as much time as they could to do it. We could actually deploy firefighters when I was in that position in 12 hours to go support those aircraft to make sure the air crews and anyone that was on those aircraft was safe. And you know, it was, like I said, it was very gratifying to be able to do those kinds of things and know that we had that capability in our United States military to do it.
You mentioned surveying airfields and making sure that each airfield had the equipment and manpower it needs to maintain a proper level of safety. What was the procedure for mobilizing a unit of firefighters? Did you have to send equipment on airplanes, or were people already there that you just had to make sure you sent the men in?
So, yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So it starts with being an Air Force civil engineer. So fire protection falls into civil engineering. Right. Within civil engineering, they have what's called the prime beef team. Don't ask me to try to figure out what prime beef actually stands for, but it's an acronym. But essentially, it's a mobility team. So what we do is we train to deploy. So we've got a bag at home packed, ready to go. We have a separate set of our firefighting equipment packed and ready to go. And then whatever other equipment we need is all pre-stationed so that we can deploy it. So that's where it starts. Then the way it would work for us is if I was the one that was going to be deployed, we'd get orders that we needed to go. We'd show up, we'd put all of our gear together, we'd prepare our apparatus to be able to be put on the plane. So we had apparatus that were designated as air mobile. So certain ones could fit on a C-130, certain ones could fit on a 141, and other ones could fit on a C-5 depending on their size. So depending on what the needs were, whichever apparatus we were going to use, we'd prepare that apparatus so that we could actually drive it on the aircraft. With the load master, it would get chained down on the aircraft. All of our equipment would be in there with it, and then we'd fly out to wherever that place was. So, for instance, when I was in Guam, for what's going on right now in Korea, we were tasked to go to Full Eagle. So it was 4 teams of 6. We all deployed into Daegu. Daegu happened to be a place where where the apparatus was pre-deployed, but we brought all of our own gear in there. So as soon as you hit the ground, now it's for 24 of us to come together, form a fire department, set it up, make it operational, and do it as fast as we can so we can support that mission that's going to go on.
And you mentioned apparatus, and I'm sure there's different types throughout the years that have been used. When you mention apparatus, do you mean fire truck? Do you mean the rig on your back? Or
Sure.
do you mean a mixture of the both?
So to give you an example, a couple of them. One is, this is called the P-15. So that was the largest of the apparatus, and that was not air deployable. We could move it, but you had to take it, there was too much to take apart to do it. So the more air mobile trucks were more like this, was the P4, and that was an air mobile truck that we could deploy with during my time that I was in the Air Force, is what we were doing. So when I say apparatus, that's what I mean. But we also were just like any fire department that you'd find today stateside. So for instance, this was my first fire station in Okinawa. So that's Station 3 in Okinawa. So it's 3 crash trucks, and then it's a civilian fire engine, is what we did. So we did everything. We did aircraft crash because of our airfield. We did structural firefighting because we had base housing. And then I looked at it as we had a large industrial complex. So all the aircraft hangars, maintenance areas, all of that was our industrial complex. And we were tasked to provide protection to it. Somewhat different in the military than the civilian side is in the civilian world you have insurance that is going to replace what's lost. The insurance in the military turns out to be us. So our job was as much to prevent fire as it was to extinguish fire, because there was no insurance. The insurance was the American taxpayer to pay for that. So our job was, 1, to prevent fire first and foremost, and 2nd, if fire occurred, to limit that damage to as little as possible.
Right. And you've talked about being accredited and going to tech school. You have certifications through the International Fire Service Accreditation Congress with Fire Officer 4, Fire Instructor 3, Fire Inspector 3. How do you have to prepare yourself mentally and physically for these kinds of certifications?
So the beginning certifications, the Firefighter 1 and 2 and those kinds of things, that was what tech school did for us. So even today, when someone goes into the Air Force, they complete basic training, they go to tech school. When they graduate from tech school, they've completed Firefighter 1 and Firefighter 2 and Aircraft Firefighter. And that's what I did. The physical side of it, I think basic training took care of that pretty much for everybody. It got you into shape pretty quick and took care of that so that it did that. Then to go on and do others, we did it in 2 manners of how we got our other training. First and foremost was what we would do with on-the-job training and what were called career development courses, or CDC courses. That was a structured course that you had to take with testing processes within it. And then specialized training, for instance, fire investigations or fire inspections or some of the driver classes that were done for to learn how to operate these fire trucks.
Right.
Those classes, you did one of two things. At that time, the fire school was located at Chanute Air Force Base in Illinois. Now it's located at Goodfellow Air Force Base in Texas. So you would actually go temporary duty, TDY, back to Chanute for however long that class was, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, complete that training to get that certification. The other way it worked, for instance with this truck, is that they would actually send the instructor to the base. So you'd go through the formal class at your base with an instructor that came from the tech school to teach that. So that was how we did that, and training is an ongoing thing. It's never ending. Just like we do professional military education, it starts on day one when you get in the military, and it runs all the way through. And I was just fortunate to be able to go through all of those steps during my career, and then those all transferred on the civilian side for me.
Right. And you also have college degrees from the Southern University of Illinois and the Community College of the Air Force. What were your degrees in?
So the first degree, the first goal or challenge is to get my fire science degree through the Community College of the Air Force. That started actually when I my first assignment to Gadena. Started taking college courses through the community, through whatever local college was on the base, so I could get enough credits to finally get my associate's degree through the Community College of the Air Force in fire science. And then it was education is an important thing, and my mentors had instilled that into me. Many said when I first got in is you can't learn this profession from a book. They're not quite correct. You can learn a lot from a book, and then you can apply those concepts in the real world. So then I went to Southern Illinois while I was working. This was when I was at Chanute at Scott Air Force, or I'm sorry, at Scott when I was at the headquarters. Did an accelerated class on weekends to be able to get my bachelor's degree in adult education. I had a lot of experience because I had been assigned as a fire training instructor at Chanute, was one of my assignments, so I liked the idea of teaching. The opportunity existed to get my degree in adult education, so I chose to get my degree in that. That also allowed me to get another associate's degree from the Community College of the Air Force as an instructor as well. And then since then, under the GI Bill, once I got out, I went back and got my master's degree in management since then. And I always encourage everybody to pursue as much education as you can. My dad, one of the individuals that worked for him, he was a Navy guy. He was a 30-year Navy man. He started on World War I submarines, and then he was recalled during World War II, and then he spent World War II on submarines again, and then retired as a Navy chief. And what Louis once said was, nobody can ever take away from you what you learn in school. So that was one of those things that had stuck with me from him. He was a great mentor as well about the need for education, and about the education is one of those things that you'll always have with you.
Right. There's a box of awards behind you. Would you care to explain any of those or elaborate on anything you have there?
Sure. So this was my retirement gift that was given to me at Dover from the fire department there. So they took the time to put this together. So what you have here is you have all of the ranks, the fire chief's badge, my medals that I had gotten during my full term as 20 years. So it means a lot. It hangs in my wall in my office today because the Air Force and this whole opportunity that it presented is something that is very meaningful to me and what we have.
And just to wrap it up, Chief, what would you consider your largest contribution to your tenure in the Air Force or even in civilian service?
You know, I think my contribution, I hope others think about it in the same way that I do. My contribution is to others. So I served in the military. I serve as a public servant today. What I'm here to do is to save lives, protect property, and do whatever it takes to make that happen. So that's what I'm all about, and that's who I work for and try to do. It doesn't matter if I'm at work or if I'm driving down the road or walking the dog or whatever else. If somebody's in need, then we need to see what we can do to help them. And that's what I hope everyone else sees in me, is that it's about service to others.
You work with the Brookfield Fire Department. Matter of fact, you're the chief there. What is it like being in charge of such a large department? What are the resources it requires to do any of the work that your department does?
So those resources really come from the public. My thought process behind that is that we're whatever the elected officials want to be. Just like the military is whatever the senior leadership wants to put resources toward. In the city of Brookfield, we're very fortunate. We have the third highest equalized value in the state of Wisconsin, even though the city is only a city of about 38,000, somewhere around 27 square miles. We provide service from 3 different fire stations. The fire service has changed immensely since I started. So when I started, we were predominantly fire and rescue. We didn't do very much emergency medical. Today, 70% of what we do is emergency medical. So today, we're very fortunate to have 3 advanced life support ambulances, and I can tell you that the men and women of the fire department make a significant difference in people's lives every single day they go to work. I read the reports, I get to go on a few of the calls, but they just do phenomenal work in trying to help people during their worst, probably their worst day of their life. For sure, when it's a fire, it's the worst day of their life. For sure, if you have to call 911 because you're hurt or injured, it's probably the worst day of your life as well. And just being able to be part of that kind of organization is kind of overwhelming at times.
You've mentioned now that the job in itself has changed immensely with the addition of the emergency medical service. What is your thought on how that's been integrated now into the fire and rescue side of operations? Does that streamline things, or does it make it even more difficult?
No, it's actually been a really good fit. We started a long time ago in bringing emergency medical services into the fire department, and we think it's a great fit for what we do. Because of the fact that we're there to help, it enables us, because we're well positioned. Our fire stations normally are positioned in a community so that we can provide very rapid service. So that's one of the key things to providing emergency medical service. If you think about it from that, from what the American Heart Association talks about, if you're having a heart attack, you need somebody there within 4 to 5 minutes that can make a difference. And we're situated to be able to actually do that. So just as we're situated to get fires before they, hopefully, as long as we get notified early enough, before they get to a large state, hopefully we can get there in time that we can make a significant difference in somebody's life when they call us for emergency medical services. So it's been a great fit. It's really what we truly do. We call ourselves a fire department, but more we're an EMS department that sometimes fight fires. But it's actually a very good fit to what we do.
You talk about protection of property and ensuring that people who are potentially having the worst day in their life, that you're trying to help them and trying to prevent this from actually becoming a huge disaster. What are some steps people can actually take at home to try and prevent fires other than forgetting to leave the oven on?
Sure. So prevention is one of those big things that it's key in the fire service. One of the things I look at is that if we lived in a world of utopia, I would tell you Brookfield, we have 58 sworn members that are all fire and EMS, and 2 administrative staff. If we were in utopia, I'd have 58 people that would be doing fire prevention and safety aspects kinds of things, working on preventing fires and keeping people healthy. But our world doesn't allow that. We're more reactive than we are proactive.
Right.
So from that safety perspective, it's really turns down to pretty simple common sense things. You said one of them. Most of the fires occur in kitchens. So just by staying in the kitchen when you're cooking, more than likely that is fire prevention in itself, because you're not leaving what's on the stove or what's in the oven unattended where that fire occurs. One of the big things that we've learned from research is that aspect to get people to close their door when they go to bed at night. Because of that fact that that simple aspect of closing a door can keep the fire from entering into your bedroom. It can gain you up to 20 minutes of time to get out if you close the door. If you don't close the door with today's furnishings, that smoke and fire can be to you in a matter of a couple of minutes because of how fast fires progress now. So those are kind of little things that we talk about, but it's other things about, making sure appliances are turned off, not using extension cords, other types of things that can cause fires to occur, and doing basic fire prevention safety to children as well to make that fire safe. Brookfield, we're very fortunate. We have what's called a Survive Alive program. So everybody comes in, we teach them a little bit about fire safety. We teach them about how to evacuate. We teach them what smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors sound like and what to do when they go off. And we're very fortunate to have that. And I look at that program as we train generations of children to be fire-safe adults.
To educate the future.
Yep, and it's a very important aspect of what we do.
So you talk about evacuation. I've heard that you shouldn't open the front door because it brings in oxygen, little things like that. Is there any tips you have for anyone in a situation where little things like that could save their life?
Sure. So in that fire situation, and you need to call 911, what we want you first to do is to evacuate. So it's leave wherever you're at. So if you're at home, get out. As you get out, what we try to tell people is just what you said, close the door behind you. Because he who controls the air controls the size of the fire. So if you close the door and you control the air, that fire has a much better chance of staying small than growing. And then what we want you to do is to call 911 from outside the structure. So either take your portable phone or take your cell phone and make that phone call from there in what you do as far as the evacuation goes. The other thing I can tell you in that emergency medical situation is stay on the line and listen to the dispatcher. So many times today, dispatchers are trained in emergency medical dispatch. So the information that that you give them, they can give you information back about how you might be able to help that individual. So anything from controlling bleeding to handling choking to starting CPR, they can coach you through those types of things. So although the dispatch center is not in the fire department, we work very closely with them because of all of the things that they do for us to get us to the right place as timely as needed so we can provide those services.
What situations do you find to be the most dangerous for both individuals in the fire department or emergency medical service and those who are actually experiencing the situation, the victims in the situation, per se?
So, there's no doubt that fire is probably the most dangerous that we do because of the fact that of its nature of not being controllable. And it presents a hazard to the victims. It presents a hazard to the firefighters that are trying to extinguish that fire or do that rescue or do that search, whatever it is. And that is one of the most dangerous situations that we deal with. So that aspect of prevention, to try to prevent it. In today's world, if we could, we'd have every home to have fire suppression sprinklers in them so that they could extinguish that fire when it's in its smallest or incipient stage so that we could, actually save more lives just by having that device in place. But that doesn't happen. So therefore, we need to do more in education to do those kinds of things, to be able to help protect the public from that advent of fire.
You talk about seriously trying to educate the younger children. What kind of programs do you have in place? What kind of programs would you like there to be in order to educate the younger people?
Sure. So we do fire prevention training throughout the year. It starts very small. We teach basic kinds of safety kinds of things about teaching kids not to play with matches or lighters or do those kinds of things and what the hazards of fire are. And then as you progress in age, it's other age appropriate types of things that we want to talk to about. And that may turn into whether or not it's flammable liquids or whether or not it's cooking or whether or not it's using or putting too many things onto a single circuit. So you plug too much into a single circuit and you cause an overload. So it's age appropriate types of things that we want to teach in fire prevention. We of course want to teach appropriate evacuation. So if you're in a two-story home, how do you evacuate off of the second floor? Do you have an escape ladder? But in today's world, with people living in condominiums and apartments, we also want to talk about what that escape route's going to be, and do you know 2 ways out of your apartment? Do you know where both exits are on that floor? Types of things. And what you're going to do when the lights are out and it's dark and you got to find your way out. So those are the other aspects that we want to teach. As much as we want to teach that prevention side of it, we want to teach that evacuation side of it. But because we do EMS, we want to talk about safe habits so you don't get hurt. We want to talk about good health habits. So whether or not, that's a matter of what you eat and the physical condition you keep yourself in, so that you can prevent some of this disease from occurring, so you don't have to live with those lifelong problems. So it's a variety of different things. Sometimes it's overwhelming because it's too much to teach.
In the past, matter of fact, when I was in middle and elementary school, the local fire department would come out and the firefighters would let us shoot the water hoses and everything. Do you do outreach programs like that in Brookfield?
Sure. So, in fact, I was at a meeting for it just this morning. So National Night Out will be in August. That's one of those outreach programs that we work with the police department and other agencies to do. So that's one of the things where if you come to Brookfield's National Night Out, we set up 2 hose lines and we allow children to actually operate that hose line and see what it's like. We're constantly have groups that come in, tour the fire stations, have that opportunity to see how we live in the fire station as well as see the apparatus. Normally they like the apparatus more because there's more things on it and more opportunities to see things. But we take them through the ambulance as well because we want everybody to know that side of the job and what we do there, and what types of things that we have to be able to treat people, on the scene. When we talk about, how that ambulance works, essentially, if you're having a cardiac problem, what they can do in the back of that ambulance is equivalent to what they can do in that emergency room. That's the type of skilled training they have and the equipment that they have to be able to treat those types of incidents.
So not only is firefighting, no matter where you're at, or emergency medical service, when you're in a situation where you need to provide help to someone, it's also a humanitarian effort to help and try to make them feel as comfortable as possible in their time of need.
Yep, it truly is. And I end up doing more of that now than I did when I was a firefighter. So the firefighter, they're going to be the ones that are going right to whatever that hazard is to try to do it. Now, today, when I'm out of my incident command role, oftentimes I'm in that humanitarian role of working with the family that's just had this tragic event, whatever it may be, and talking to them, trying to calm them down, trying to offer them resources to try to help them through that situation. Because more than likely they've never been there before. They have no idea of what's going to happen next or what they're going to do next. So we have a set of resources normally available for all those situations that we can sit with them, give them some advice, give them some materials to be able to start to figure out how to put their life back together again.
This has been an interview, Chief, I'd like to thank you so much for the interview. It's been truly a pleasure to talk to you and work with you on this.
Do I get to say thank you to you for taking your time
like.
to do all that research and to interview me? Because what I've done is what anybody else can do. There's nothing special. I just happen to be a guy that's got a title.
This has been an interview with Fire Chief and veteran Charlie Myers regarding his service to his country for 20 years and now his service to the city of Brookfield. The time is 4:51. Thank you for agreeing to this interview, Chief, and most importantly, thank you for your service.
Thank you.